Mangwanani mwalelepo vukenjani qeqas wanawe Africa. Welcome to Africa Good Morning, the news and current affairs show bringing you everything you need to know happening in the SADC region and beyond. I'm your host, Ashwin Mbedi. Today is Monday, the 1st of November. You have approximately 60 days to make sure those resolutions that you didn't get done in the last 10 months, you can just finish them off now. But today specifically is Authors' Day. If you've known the pains of raising little women or have ridden on a raft with Huck Finn, if you've read all the horrors of Stephen King and lost yourself with things too terrible to describe in Lovecraft, you've enjoyed some of the classics that authors can spin. Authors' Day commemorates all the wonders that have been spun into the world by the pen of these creative souls. Share in our comments some of your favorite authors. I'm a big Steve Biko fan myself. Check out this video on Authors' Day. This is Africa Good Morning, and these are today's top stories. March of millions in Sudan to demand restoration of civilian government. Protesters are taking to the streets of Sudan on Saturday to demand the restoration of a civilian government. Neighborhood committees and other activists planned Saturday's March of Millions under the slogan, Leave. Volker Perthes, the special representative of United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, said in a statement on Friday that he remains in constant contact with all sides to facilitate a political solution in line with the constitutional document. The military takeover occurred after weeks of escalating tensions between military and civilian leaders over Sudan's transition to democracy. Sudanese military chief General Abdel Fattah Burhan said on Tuesday the army's overthrow of the country's transitional government was necessary to avoid a civil war. Guterres said in a statement on Friday, "I urge the military to show restraint and not to create any more victims. People must be allowed to demonstrate peacefully, and this is essential." In our next story, U.S. government dismisses UN Special Rapporteur's call for removal of sanctions in Zimbabwe. The United Nations representative to the United States representative to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, has dismissed United Nations Special Rapporteur Alina Dohan's report, blaming targeted sanctions against Zimbabwe for the country's failed economy. Responding to questions on Dohan's preliminary report presented last Thursday to journalists in Harare after her 10-day visit to Zimbabwe, Thomas-Greenfield said the U.S. will always resist any such criticism. "I have not seen the Special Rapporteur's report on Zimbabwe, but let me be clear, our sanctions target individuals and institutions that are committing human rights violations, and we make every effort to ensure that those sanctions do not impact the people," Thomas-Greenfield said. In her report, Dohan called on the West and the U.S. to remove targeted restrictions against Zimbabwean individuals and companies as it is worsening the country's economy. In the next story, discontent simmers after Eswatini monarchy bans protests. Workers, civil servants, and even high school students have taken to the streets, clashing with police in the tiny Southern African kingdom to demand direct elections, better pay, and the release of 2 pro-democracy lawmakers arrested in July. Almost 60% of the population lived below the national poverty line before the pandemic, according to the World Bank, and COVID-linked inflation has only made matters worse. The palace has banned protests, and the promise of dialogue follows the intervention of African mediators. Mswati, who succeeded his revered father Sobhuza II in 1986, has been accused of draining public coffers. The 53-year-old monarch's annual salary, paid by the government, was last reported at around $60 million. He holds stakes in Eswatini's main companies, including one of Africa's largest sugar producers, and caused uproar in 2019 for allegedly gifting gifting Rolls Royces and BMWs to his 15 wives. G20 leaders seek consensus on climate, economy, and vaccines. Leaders of the world's most advanced nations met on Saturday at the G20 summit in Rome, hoping to hammer out a way forward on climate change and vaccine equality, with consensus still outstanding on the most pressing global issues. In their first in-person gathering since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, the relaunch of the global economy will also be front and center on the two-day agenda, while the bloc is likely to approve a minimum tax rate for the biggest multinationals. Looming over the talks is pressure to make headway on tackling global warming before they join a wider group of world leaders gathering for the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow. A surer bet for concrete progress at the G20 involves taxation, as the group is expected to endorse the 15% minimum international tax rate on multinational companies after nearly 140 countries reached an OECD broker deal. No new pledges are expected to address the vast gap in COVID-19 vaccine access between rich and poor countries. Draghi said G20 should do all we can to meet a WHO goal of vaccinating 70% of the global population by mid-2022. In the next story, only 5 African countries may fully vaccinate 40% of their population by year end. Only 5 African countries will meet the target of fully vaccinating 40% of their populations against COVID-19 unless the pace of inoculations accelerates across the continent, World Health Organization said on Thursday. The COVID-19 vaccine rollout may be slowed by the imminent shortfall of up to 2.2 billion auto-disposable syringes globally needed to administer the jab and routine immunizations, barring an increase in their manufacturing, WHO Africa said. Early next year, COVID-19 vaccines will start pouring into Africa, but a scarcity of syringes could paralyze progress. Drastic measures must be taken to boost syringe production fast, said Mashidi Somweti, WHO's Africa director. So far, the continent has fully vaccinated 77 million people, just 6% of its population. 12 lifeless bodies found in the waters of Ituri River in Mutwei. More than a dozen lifeless bodies were found earlier this week on the Ituri River near Mutwei, near Southern Commander in Irumu territory. Civil society Manove announced on Tuesday, October 26, that they had discovered 12 lifeless bodies floating in the waters of the Ituri River. The dead would be the bodies of people killed by ADF in this region, where these rebels are very active. We move over to South Africa, as local polls attest for the future of South Africa's ANC. It is the final stretch before South Africa turns out to vote in local elections, and the African National Congress is struggling with the harsh reality. This week, its former leader, ex-President Jacob Zuma, appeared in court again for one of his many corruption scandals. A new wave of blackouts rolled across the country, interrupting the ANC's own campaigning and reminding voters of the party's dismal economic record. In past months, unemployment has hit a record 34.4%. In July, political infighting spiraled into looting and social unrest that left 354 dead and hammered the economy. Political observers will be scrutinizing their performance to see whether it presages further crumbling of support for the big parties ahead of general elections in 2024. Despite this backdrop of change, many voters seem uninterested. A third of potential voters have not even bothered to register. Now in Congo, the misdeeds of corruption degrade the image of the DRC. The United Nations Development Programme and Sweden have affirmed their support to the DRC government in the fight against corruption in a document signed by the UNDP resident representative in DRC, Dominic Sam, and Pravenu at the ACP. According to the document, Sweden and the UNDP welcome the expression of the Congolese authorities' responsibility to fight fight corruption and appreciates the discussions that took place during the work of the States General on the fight against corruption held in Kinshasa from 19 to 23 current, explains the source. According to the diplomat, public expectations are high and people know that victory over corruption is the key to winning the battle for development and governance. The DRC is giving the world its share of the solution in mitigating climate change. Because of its forests and biodiversity, it deserves to be supported in the battle against corruption by all for the good of the Congolese populations, noted the UN diplomat. Mozambique president sued in UK for over $2 billion debt scandal. Mozambique's President Filipe Nyusi is being sued in London by a firm at the center of a $2 billion loan scandal that plunged his nation into a financial crisis. Abu Dhabi-based shipbuilder Privinvest, owned by French-Lebanese billionaire Iskandar Safar, signed contracts with Mozambique state companies to supply tuna fishing and maritime security vessels. The deals were made before Mr. Nyusi was elected, and Privinvest has denied bribery to win the contracts, arguing its payments were political donations that were legal in Mozambique at the time. The debt scandal has sparked legal cases across 3 continents and exposed corruption on a global scale. On the same day, Privinvest served its papers on Nyusi. Swiss bank Credit Suisse was being fined $475 million for fraudulently misleading investors and corruption over its part in issuing the loans. Back to the DR Congo, Belgian Minister of State André Flahaut this Saturday in Kinshasa. A strong delegation of Belgian partners and parliamentarians, led by the Minister of State, Federal Deputy and Vice President of the House of Representatives, André Flahaut, is expected in Kinshasa to participate in the Great Fair of Entrepreneurs, scheduled for November 5 in the Congolese capital. A working session of the Mixed National Assembly Senate Preparatory Committee took place under the leadership of the President of the Upper House of Parliament, Modetse Bahati Lukwebo. The program provides a series of meetings between this delegation and the head of state, Felix Tshisekedi, Prime Minister Sama Lukende, as well as with several other personalities of the country. The mission is part of the strengthening of parliamentary diplomacy between the 2 states, concluded the spokesperson for the Joint Preparatory Committee, National Assembly Senate. In our next story, call to end hunger by 2030. Deputy Prime Minister Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah has called for concerted efforts from all stakeholders, including government, to end hunger by 2030. Nandi-Ndaitwah, who is also the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, oversees disaster management programs in the country. She expressed happiness that WFP was applying a food systems approach in Southern Africa. However, she said increasing food production is not in itself the solution to eliminating hunger and malnutrition in Namibia, in Southern Africa, nor the world at large. Nandi-Ndaitwah said Namibia is an arid country with very harsh terrains and climate to support agriculture, on which many Namibians depend for their livelihoods. She implored the delegates to come up with transformative and innovative approaches that support food and nutrition security. In the last of our top stories, hailstorm breaks power poles, damages homes in the south. A severe hailstorm in the south caused damage at least 2 houses at Keetmanshoop, as well as in the Karas Mountains, while breaking large power poles and ripping them to the ground. Farmers say the hails even killed birds at the same time, and the Weather Office warned again against severe storms today in the eastern parts of the Karas region, as well as in the Omaheke and Oshodonjupa regions. Hendrik Steenkamp of Farm Spitskop Oos, 40 kilometers northeast of Keetmanshoop, said the roof of his house had been torn down, while the ceiling had also been torn out in some places. A camelthorn tree in Spitskop East, which Steenkamp believes must have been about 100 years old, was also completely uprooted. On the Facebook page Rain in Namibia, Rina Boyson also shared photos of her house in the Karas Mountains, whose windows were blown off by hail as big as golf balls. All right, that brings us to the end of our top stories. Some of the words you've been hearing, or the letters and numbers you've been hearing, are COP26. We're going to be talking more about that happening in Glasgow after the break.
Strike it gold and win 5,000 Namibian dollars in cash with Neo Paints. Simply buy Neo Paints products from the selected range and stand a chance to get one of 12 mystery buckets filled with gold paint. All 12 winners will each get 3 extra paint buckets equal to their purchase. One to replace the gold paint, the second to use on your project, and the third to give to a charity of their choice. One winner can score another 10,000 Namibian dollars by showing us your creative use of the golden paint. The best project wins the cash. Offer is valid from 27 September to 18 December at your favorite hardware store nationwide. Visit us at neopaints.com for more competition details and follow us on Facebook for weekly competition updates. Neo Paints, a coat of excellence.
The 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26, is starting in Glasgow, Scotland. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, along with the COP26 United Kingdom President Alok Sharma, briefed the member states earlier on how to prepare for Glasgow. He stressed the need to further expand the growing coalition for carbon neutrality, i.e. countries that have set a target for reaching net zero emissions by 2050, backed by ambitious, nationally determined contributions. In the following video, he sets the table for what will happen in Scotland for the next 12 days.
Thank you. I'm now delighted to hand the floor to the Secretary-General to make his opening remarks. Secretary-General, thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues, we are 9 months away from COP26. A critical milestone in our efforts to avert climate catastrophe. And I am very pleased that the incoming COP president is here to discuss with all of you the road to Glasgow. The past year has seen welcome progress. I thank those who showed leadership by announcing bold new commitments at the Climate Ambition Summit I convened with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and the President of France in December. Countries representing 70% of the world economy and 65% of global carbon dioxide emissions have now committed to net zero. 2 weeks ago, I met with the chief executive officers of the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance, a coalition that represents over $5 trillion US. And they have committed to double the size of this group by COP26. This is a meaningful momentum, but of course, it's not enough. The world remains way off target in staying with the 1.5-degree limit of the Paris Agreement. And this is why we need more ambition on mitigation, ambition on adaptation, and ambition on finance. The global coalition for net zero emissions needs to grow to cover more than 90% of the emissions. And this is a central objective for the United Nations this year. The drive to net zero must become the new normal for everyone, everywhere, for every country, every company, city, financial institution, as well as the key sectors such as aviation, shipping, industry, and agriculture. At the same time, all commitments to net zero must be underpinned by clear and credible plans to achieve them. Words are not enough. By COP26 at the latest, all countries need to come forward with significantly more ambitious nationally determined contributions, with 2030 targets consistent with a net zero pathway. The major economies and members of the G20 must lead the way. Developing countries, particularly the small island developing states and the least developed countries, must be given the support they need to enhance their climate ambition. The science and the economics are clear. Coal must be phased out by 2030 in OECD countries and by 2040 in all other countries, in conjunction with a just transition. Investments in coal are a losing proposition. Financing for coal and other fossil fuels abroad must stop and be redirected towards the clean energy transition. Climate impacts in every region and on every continent are worsening. In the space of a few weeks, Fiji and other Pacific islands have been struck by 2 devastating cyclones. We need a breakthrough on adaptation and resilience, and this is also a priority for all of us and for the UN this year. All donors, all multilateral and national development banks must increase the share of adaptation and resilience finance to at least 50% of their climate finance support. And I welcome the commitment by the Netherlands at the recent Climate Adaptation Summit, as well as the steps taken by the African Development Bank and the World Bank. But we need much more. And we must also ensure simplified and expedited climate support for the most vulnerable. Climate finance flowing to LDCs and seeds stands at 14% and 2% respectively. We have a moral obligation to do much better, and with new and scaled up finance initiative and instruments. Developed countries must meet their commitment made over 10 years ago and reaffirmed in Paris to mobilize $100 billion per year in climate finance to developing countries. And these must be fully delivered in the run-up to COP26. The report I issued last December contained a number of recommendations on how to get there. And I count in particular on G7 countries to deliver. And the Green Climate Fund must also be fully capitalized. And we need all multilateral and national development banks to commit to full Paris alignment by 2024 at the latest. And we also need to effectively address debt relief efforts to provide liquidity to countries most vulnerable to climate change. And this is an effort we have been very closely following in the context of the recovery of COVID-19. Excellencies, dear friends, I cannot overestimate the importance of the negotiations in the months ahead of Glasgow. Because of COVID-19, it is unlikely that the usual schedule of meetings will happen in person. Preparatory negotiations for COP26 will need to take place virtually. I know it's not easy, but it is essential. And with your flexibility and the creative guidance of the COP president and of Ms. Espinosa, our executive secretary, we can conduct our business in an inclusive and transparent manner. We simply cannot allow the pandemic to keep us from working together on the crucial pathway to Glasgow. Although there will be challenges, we must adapt. The stakes are too high to do otherwise. And I have directed UN officials around the world to make offices and venues available to allow for all countries to participate in virtual negotiations. We will support this process in every way possible to ensure its success. And we must send a clear message to the parties. It is time to wrap up negotiations and move towards its full implementation. This means bridging the current political divide over outstanding issues related to finance, capacity building, technology transfer, transparency, and especially Article 6. For everyone to win, everyone must be ready to make compromises. Global markets have long demanded clarity from governments on establishing a policy foundation for an emissions trading system that maintains environmental integrity and puts a global price on carbon. This issue cannot be deferred from COP after COP after COP. We need now a political decision. Finally, a successful COP26 means positive engagement of observers and other non-party stakeholders, including key NGO constituencies, including youth, women, and indigenous peoples. We need every voice at the table. As we collectively address our climate emergency, no voice and no solution should be left behind. 2021 is a crucial year in the fight against climate change. I look to all member states to work together to build on the momentum that has been generated and to fully support the COP26 presidency on the road to Glasgow. Thank you very much.
Take our love to the top. If I got it and you want it and you'll never let it drop. All we gotta do is take our love to the top. I will ride for you, baby, even die for you. When I'm loving you, but my heart don't stop.
Africa Good Morning is your reliable source for decentralized African news. Keeping that in mind, we're going to cross over to Zambia and find out the happenings on the ground, the only way we know how, from Mr. Mike Sichula. Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Africa, good morning. I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing there also?
I am fantastic. Now, in the first budget, the new administration has unveiled a budget worth 173 billion kwacha, the equivalent of 10 billion US dollars. Could you tell us about this?
This is the first budget by the United Party for National Development, led by Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, who took office on 24th August 2021. So in their first budget, they have unveiled over 173 billion kwacha, which is equivalent to 10 billion United States dollars as their major budget. In this budget, they have made a number of pronouncements which include the decentralization agenda that devolves power to 10 provincial cities, 10 provincial towns under different local government authorities. So we can now listen to the video and see one of the major pronouncements that the new administration has made in their budget.
Madam Speaker, for the first time in the history of this country, we will recruit 30,000 teachers. Madam Speaker, just like in the education sector, the new Dawn administration is breaking the record of recruitment in the health sector. In 2022, we will recruit and deploy 11,200 health workers. This is unprecedented.
So those are some of the major pronouncements that have been made in the budget, where you are going to have the recruitment of over 30,000 teachers. Zambia, for your own information, has got over 50,000 trained teachers who are not employed. Then in the health sector, there are a number of health workers that are trained, but they have remained unemployed. So for the last 10 years or 20 years, these numbers that have been announced by the new administration, they are major and they are historical and unprecedented, like the Minister of Finance just said in that video.
Looks very exciting over there. Now, in his second international trip since he took office in August, President Hakainde Hichilema has traveled to Glasgow, Scotland for the COP26 summit. Could you please tell us about that?
Yes, this is the second international trip that President Hakainde Hichilema having made this states, where he attended the United Nations General Assembly. This trip is important, according to what President Hakainde Hichilema has said, because of the effects of climate change that have not spared Zambia. The agricultural sector is one of the areas that has been hit by climate change. We have also had incidences of flooding in some parts of the country whenever it rains, which have also been attributed to effects of climate change. So before he left the country over the weekend, this is what he said to the media at State House.
So many negatives, and if humanity does not attend to controlling the measures that are required to control climate change, we'll be killing ourselves, we'll be damaging ourselves. So we're going to this conference where decisions will be made, commitments will be made before, but more decisions, more commitments, especially targets to reduce the increase in the temperatures. All of us must oblige ourselves as countries to those obligations, to those targets, in order to contain the increase in the temperature globally. Because if we don't, we are causing disaster. This COP26 is very important. Very important.
Mr. President, we understand that during your visit, you...
So, like the President has said, this COP26 is very important, and indeed it is very important because climate change has hit many African countries badly, including developed countries.
Truly, truly so. Now, in your last update, please keep it as short as possible. I know it'll be difficult, but Enoch Mwepu has become the very first Zambian player to score against English giants Liverpool at Anfield. Tell us briefly about that.
Enoch Mwepu was voted man of the match in the match that he played against Liverpool. He helped Brighton Hove to a 2-0 draw at Anfield. That was a major achievement because in his he has always stated that it has been his dream to play at Anfield, and to score against Liverpool was a dream come true for Enoch Mwepu.
All right, very, very nice. Looks like the man manifested his own reality. Thank you, Mike, for bringing us the news from Zambia.
Thank you very much, Africa. Good morning. Do have a blessed week. Thank you.
We certainly hope to have a blessed week, but prior to that, we want to have a blessed day. And there's only one way to make sure of that, by checking out the weather forecast up next. Africa Good Morning is still the best place to get the reliable news you need happening all over the African continent. So keeping that in mind, we're going to take a trip to Botswana and have a chat with our correspondent, Masego Mohwasa. Good morning, Masego. How are you? Good morning, Masego. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Good morning, Africa.
All right, in your first story,
Can hear you.
Botswana, yeah, wonderful. Botswana surpasses South Africa and Zimbabwe in vaccination numbers per capita. Could you please get into this?
As Botswana enters its third phase of vaccination, opening up to a 18 to 30 age group, this year it has now passed South Africa and Zimbabwe to be the African country highest percent vaccinated. This just vaccines have begun to flow into the country at a bi-weekly rate on average. Currently, Botswana stands at 46% of its eligible population having their first jab, and the second jab of fully vaccinated people stand at 18.3%.
All right, the former leader of the Directorate of Intelligence and Security is in court for illegal possession of firearms, among others. Tell us about
it. Yes, the boss of the Directorate of Intelligence and Security, who seemed completely frustrated and lamenting harassment he was receiving, appeared after he was searched over alleged items taken, including phones and firearms, whose plea was reserved due to an infancy of investigations, as said by the state prosecutor. The charge sheet, of which the 6 charges ranged from possession of ammunition without license, possession of military resemblance.
Unfortunately, we're having trouble connecting to Masego Mohwasa in Botswana. We hope to be able to do that either in this show or later in the week. But this is still Africa Good Morning, bringing you the news and current affairs happening in the SADC region and beyond. Right now, we're going to take a short break, and after that, your economic news stories. Welcome back to Africa. Good morning. As promised, it's time for us to dive straight into your economic news stories. And we start off in Namibia. Communications regulator, MTC, clash over infrastructure sharing. The Communications Regulatory Authority of Namibia and the mobile telecommunications company are butting heads on the implementation of shared infrastructure in the telecommunications industry. While CRAN is pushing ahead with the implementation of shared infrastructure, MTC says it would file a reconsideration application. In the case of MTC, the idea was for it to share infrastructure with MTN. The ongoing tug of war between MTC and CRAN is the result of an independent assessment which showed that the former has capacity to share its infrastructure with other players. Consumers benefit through limiting duplication of infrastructure so that new investments can be geared towards underserved areas and improved customer service. In our next story, Transnet's record 8.4 billion rand loss for COVID-hit financial year. COVID-19 has dealt a massive financial blow to state-owned ports and rail logistics group Transnet, which reported a record net loss of 8.4 billion rand on Friday for its financial year to the end of March 2021. This is compared to a 7.9 billion rand profit in its prior financial year. After a long delay, the group finally released its latest financial results late on Friday. Reiterating the group's since results statement, Transnet CEO Portia Derby said the performance was reflective of the economic circumstances faced by the company, largely due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and related lockdowns. Throughout the COVID-19 crisis, Transnet continued to meet its financial commitments without requiring any debt service relief from its lenders, it noted. Back to Namibia. Namibia dividends boost state coffers. Namib Desert Diamonds has declared a dividend of 40 million Namibian dollars to government, its sole shareholder, for the 2020-2021 financial year. The SOE also paid the Ministry of Finance 43.5 million Namibian dollars in income tax and 11.3 Namibian dollars in export levies in its past financial year. Namibia profit after tax for 2020-2021 amounted to 13.3 million Namibian dollars, down 86% from the prior year's 95.2 million Namibian dollars. The period under review had 6 sales totaling 144,967 carats for an average of $94.75 US per carat. The ordinary profit before tax of Namibia amounted to 73.7 million Namibian dollars, down from 150.2 million Namibian dollars, or 51% the previous financial year. In our next story, closer collaboration sought between aviation and tourism. Recognizing that aviation and tourism are critical tools in the environmental, economic, and social development of countries, the International Civil Aviation Organization and the UN World Tourism Organization have formalized a new memorandum of understanding to strengthen the relationship between air transport and tourism. Signed this week by ICAO Council President Salvatore Sishashitano and by UNWTO Secretary General Zurab Pololikashvili, the new agreement will focus on improved relationships in the fields of research, policy, and management areas, and it will improve coordination on efficient border management priorities. Pololikashvili said tourism and air travel are essential pillars of growth and opportunity, most notably for developing countries and communities. Now, in the last of our economic news stories, over 60s handed 100 Rand voucher incentive to get jab in November. A 100 Rand Vuma voucher from ShopRite Checkers will be the reward for people above the age of 60 who opt for COVID-19 inoculation in November. The initiative, announced by the National Department of Health on Friday, is sponsored by, among others, the D.G. Murray Trust, Alan and Jill Gray Philanthropy, the Bill and Melinda Gates Gates Foundation, Elmer Vaccine and Immunization Foundation, and Michael Susan Dow Foundation. We hope the pilot will be a success so that it can encourage other companies to come forward, said Minister of Health Joe Pahla. The hope is that the money will help offset costs for those who must pay for transport to get to vaccination stations. Travel costs have been identified as a major barrier to vaccination, especially for those whose only income is an old age grant. All right, that brings us to the end of our economic news stories. You know what comes next, economic indicators.
Strike it gold and win 5,000 Namibian dollars in cash with Neo Paints. Simply buy Neo Paints products from the selected range and stand a chance to get one of 12 mystery buckets filled with gold paint. All 12 winners will each get 3 extra paint buckets equal to their purchase. One to replace the gold paint, the second to use on your project, and the third to give to a charity of their choice. One winner can score another 10,000 Namibian dollars by showing us your creative use of the golden paint. The best project wins the cash. Offer is valid from 27 September to 18 December at your favorite hardware store nationwide. Visit us at neopaints.com for more competition details and follow us on Facebook for weekly competition updates. Neo Paints, a coat of excellence.
Now, it was certainly an exciting sporting weekend. Some football clubs managed to sort of make us forget what happened to them last weekend. But Ari Hochart is going to be starting off with cricket and bringing you everything happening in the sporting world. Good morning, Ari. Do take it away.
Thank you, Ashwin. Yes, indeed, a busy sporting weekend. And like you said, lots of interesting soccer results. Let's start with the cricket. It's the World Cup. It's a T20 World Cup. It's a great time for Southern African cricket as well. Namibia doing really great. But for Southern African cricket, Namibia did struggle yesterday. They lost to Afghanistan. Afghanistan proving to be a very strong team in this Cricket World Cup. They definitely have the best spin bowl attack in the competition. Rashid Khan, the wrist spinner, is going to be a threat for all the teams. And they in a position that they might even take one of the 2 top positions. But lots of cricket to still play. Just going on to the results real quickly. Namibia that lost, unfortunately, by 62 runs to Afghanistan. That is Gerard Erasmus, inspiring captain of Namibia. So he will be key in the next 2 games. They have 2 big games. They play India and New Zealand in the last 2 games. And then Southern African interest as well. South Africa, a very exciting last win over Sri Lanka. Crucial win for them. They beat Sri Lanka by 4 wickets. And then 2 big results from the weekend. It was England celebrating there. They beat Australia by a big margin by 8 wickets with 8 overs to spare. And then yesterday it was New Zealand that was too strong for India. And New Zealand winning that game also by 8 wickets by a big margin. and that leaves Pakistan and New Zealand probably the early favourites to go through in that group. And today there will be more cricket. It's England that plays Sri Lanka, big game for them, and a big game for Southern African interests as well. South Africa probably need to beat England to try and go through in Group A, a very tough group. And then tomorrow it is South Africa, Bangladesh, and then Namibia play Pakistan tomorrow. It is Namibia play Pakistan tomorrow. So they 2 games, Pakistan and New Zealand. And let's go on to some soccer news that over the weekend that Ashton talked about. It is first Chelsea that stay on top of the English Premier League. They had a good win 3-0 against Newcastle, so they stay on top of the log. Surprising results, Liverpool and Manchester City both dropping points at home. Liverpool 2-2 draw against Brighton, and then a big surprise, Manchester City losing to Crystal Palace, and that score was 2-0 in favour of Crystal Palace. And Manchester United made the comeback after losing 5-0 last weekend against Liverpool, and that's Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who's a bit more happy this past weekend. They had a big win away at Tottenham Hotspur. They won 3-0. Manchester United on winning ways. Tottenham Hotspur now looking to fire their coach. So it's a tough world, all these football world. Just in brief then, also, well, a result to remember, Arsenal, they won against Leicester City. That was away from them 2-0. So Arsenal doing brilliant. They lost the first 3 games of the season, but they now number 6 on the log together with Manchester United. And this coming weekend, a big game for Manchester United. They play Manchester City. So at the moment, Chelsea, after 10 games, 25 points. Liverpool, 10 games, 22 points. On to some rugby news from the weekend. There were 2 internationals played. The big one, so to speak, was in Wales. It was the All Blacks that played against Wales. The All Blacks too strong for Wales. That's Beauden Barrett in his 100th test. He scored a few tries as well, an intercept try or 2. Wales, that was not a match for the All Blacks. All Blacks winning 54 points to 16. Must say that they were... Wales was not at full strength. It was outside of the international window, so there was 7 players that couldn't play for them. Wales play South Africa, the Springboks, this coming weekend, and they will be a stronger outfit when they play the Springboks this Saturday. Also, Scotland that hosted Tonga, and Scotland too strong for Tonga. The score 56 points to 14. And then just news from that game, South African-born Kyle Steyn. He scored for the first time for Scotland 4 tries at Twickenham. So South African Kyle Steyn. He played for University of Stellenbosch and also for Griquas. So well done to Kyle Steyn. Now on to some tennis news. It was the Transylvania Open that was played in Romania in the women's section of the tennis world. And it was Annette Kurkantovi. She's from Estonia. And she won her first pro tournament, and also a big one for her because she qualifies for the WTA, the finals, the top 8 of the women's section that goes through. That is Emma Raducanu, high profile after winning the US Open, but she unfortunately lost in the quarterfinals. So Annette Kurkantovi, she beat Simone Halep in the final quite convincingly, 6-2 and 6-3. To win that tournament in Romania. On the men's tour, just really quickly, it was the Vienna Open that was played on the men's circuit, and Alexander Zverev from Germany, that was too strong for Francis Tiafoe of the USA, and it was tight game, 7-5, 6-4. He won that game, so Alexander Zverev, he was the second seed. Tsitsipas of Greece, he fell out in the semi-finals. And just to close off some golf news over the globe, it was in Dubai. It was the Dubai Moonlight Classic. They play under some floodlights as well, a very unique golfing experience for them. Together with the Cricket T20 World Cup, there was lots of sporting actions in Dubai, obviously. And the winner is England's Beyoncé Law, and it is the maiden ladies European title. And that was for a total of -15, and Southern African interest Leanne Pace. She was tied 4th on 11 under par. And just to close off, in the Bermuda Championship in the USA, the US PGA, it was Australian Lucas Herbert. He's number 56 in the world, but he came through to win his first PGA title at the score of 15 under par. He's from Australia. That is Garrick Hugo, the Southern African interest. Garrick Hugo, he closed, unfortunately, with a 4 over par score yesterday. He was tied 34th on -5. So Lucas Herbert winning that tournament. So that's all the sporting news for the weekend. I hope your team did well. And hopefully you have a great sporting week as well. We talk again on Friday to preview the sporting weekends. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Ari, for bringing us the news from the sporting world. We're going to take a short break and we'll be back with today's headlines. Africa Good Morning has been streaming live from 7 a.m., bringing you the news and current affairs from the SADC region and beyond. Now, if you perhaps missed our top stories at the top of the hour, or if you need a recap, worry not. Here are the headlines. March of millions in Sudan to demand restoration of civilian government. U.S. government dismisses UN Special Rapporteur's call for removal of sanctions in Zimbabwe. Discontent simmers after Eswatini monarchy bans protests. G20 leaders seek consensus on climate, economy, and vaccines. Communications regulator, MTC, clash over infrastructure sharing. In cricket, the ICC T20 World Cup continued with both South Africa and Namibia playing important group games over the weekend. All right, that brings us to the end of our stories. You can check a repeat of this show on our website, oneup2.com from 8:30. And you can make sure that you can see, or check out our schedule right now so you can see all the shows that you love coming to you straight from NMH. All right, do make sure that you remember that we are in a pandemic. Sanitize, social distance. And while you're at it, talk to us. Contact us on our pages. Interact with us, Africa Good Morning on Facebook and Twitter. And do send us an email if you have something you'd like to say at agm_2centsworth@nmh.com.na. I do understand that we are living in a world where we are bombarded with anxieties. So I'd like to encourage you to remember what the Shona say, which is Chikuru Kufema. The most important thing to do is to breathe. My name is Ashwin Berry. See you tomorrow.